Alright everyone, it's time to talk about how the United States no longer fundamentally has a free press at all. The Western world at large is kind of lacking a free press. The internet's dominated by English-speaking news and Hindi news now. A lot of it is basically, there's two forms of this. The first is that if you look at the cable newsprint, the missing link media, it's basically a state media entity. And by this I don't mean party, by the way. They're more than willing to amplify Republicans as well as Democrats, so long as they're saying the right things. You have some off-hook media sites that cater to the far left, like a Jacobin sort of thing. You have some right-wing media, like a Breitbart or a Blaze or something, that are kind of independent. But for the most part, the more moneyed, empowered, corporatized side of the media is basically nothing more than a mouthpiece for neoliberalism. World policing, globalistic trade policies, destroying the middle and working class, global one world order versus nationalism, or at least having nation states with governments that represent the interests of their people. Instead, we're all supposed to work together as a world community. Even with countries that are being openly hostile towards us, we have to empower and enable them. And then you have independent commentary, like you have what I'm doing, but look at what happens to us. Alt tech is constantly under attack, for corporate moneyed purposes, by the way, not even for political ones. Constantly attacked by the legacy media, by propaganda, by defamation. Independent commentators are constantly harassed and persecuted. There are constant attacks on our character. There are constant attacks on the platforms we use to try to drive us off, again, because we are their competitors. Now, while independent commentary, by and large, in my belief, is winning, old guard media, the trustworthiness ranking of old guard media has plummeted over the last few years, and not without good reason. By and large, it's still one hell of a struggle. And when you have a political system, and you do, specifically under Biden especially right now, that is openly hostile towards independent media, when you have a bunch of sellouts like Greg Abbott within the Republican Party, or Romney, or any of these others, that supposedly represent an opposite interest but really coalesce and congeal with the neoliberals on anything related to free speech, which they oppose, alt tech, which they oppose, big tech, which they do not want to regulate. When you have that situation, do you really have a free press? You as well, I would say, if you look at, for instance, Biden's first press conference, you never have any attempt to follow through on questions. You have no attempt to actually sort of pry the truth out of Joe Biden, and this is just one individual. This has been going on for a number of years. There's no attempt at actual journalism, and if you engage in actual journalism, you get to platform. Look at people like Lauren Southern or Tim Pool that actually go out there on the ground and talk to people. They're the first to get hit. Satirists, unless they toe the line of telling, the 10th Trump joke today, the same thing happens to them. Anyone who satirizes any of the sacred cows of the legacy media immediately gets put on blast as being a Nazi or extreme or there's mentally ill. There's something wrong with them. There's no free press. The press is literally just amplifying whatever the state declares to be the case, unironically, usually adding a second layer of propaganda upon it. I pointed out the other day the use of the term permanent pandemic as a replacement for the term endemic, which was used just weeks ago to describe COVID. COVID is now endemic. This is agreed upon, by the way, to YouTube, it's agreed by the WHO that this is the case. This is the official line of them. It's an endemic disease. It's not going anywhere. Because of its mutation rate, potentially it mutates past any vaccination attempts that you use. You could end up with a multi-year struggle that eventually collapses. But endemic implies that there's nothing you can do about it, so you should go back to normal. They don't want to go back to normal. So what do? They use their linguistic propaganda, and they say it's permanent pandemic. That sounds scarier now, doesn't it? And I analyzed the other day, I guarantee if you took polling, people who are presented with the same news story but the term permanent pandemic as opposed to endemic for COVID would be more receptive to the idea of COVID passports, permanent mask usage, permanent school shutdowns, the overhaul of society, the Great Reset sort of things. They'd be more willing to accept that because permanent pandemic is much scarier. Pandemic sounds scarier than endemic. Endemic just means it's there. Pandemic at least implies, even though you're talking about the same disease, that it's a horror show and people are dropping like flies. Even if that's not the case, the linguistics matter because it's literally how people understand the world. Your mind is being toyed with on a day-to-day basis. Whenever I look at the legacy media, whenever I look, even the structure of their websites is a form of propaganda. A lie by structure, lie by omission, half-truths buried in articles and so forth. It's maddening. And people don't even fucking realize it. Even people that are openly hostile, like some Trump fans, like, well, I fucking hate CNN. Even they presented with the report. They won't understand the finer points of why the report is a lie, how it's lying to them, how it's misrepresenting the truth. Well, it's not a free press. And it's funny. Here's another thing. Here's propaganda about propaganda. We're at multi-levels of propaganda on this one. Whenever you say, well, it's fake news, because it's literally fake, they'll say, well, Hitler said the same thing. He had a term called Lügenpresse. He'd say the lying press, and he used it to oppress people. So, ergo, you are a Nazi. I prefer the comparison to the yellow journalists of the muckraking era, the carpetbagging era. This is before the Nazi Party existed, by the way. It was in the United States. You had journalists who were basically just pawns of corporations or political attaches to attack their enemies. With salacious stories, they'd dig through their garbage, literally. They would spy on them, literally, and try to catch them with their pants down, literally, in order to present a false reality of that person being dirty, when actually the corporation or the politician hiring the yellow journalist was dirty. You had muckraking going on and so forth. This is during the era when the carpetbaggers, by the way, established the first monopolies in the United States, collapsing later the economy and then blaming it on the free market that never existed. Very interesting facet of history. Read about carpetbaggers. You've learned about the Great Depression, but you don't know why it happened by and large. A lot of people think it was just speculation by little people. Random middle-classers bought a bunch of stocks, speculated them into oblivion in a total vacuum without any impetus whatsoever, and managed to bring down the Western world's economy. That's not how it happened, even if your history books told you so. I'm sorry, but you've been lied to for hundreds of years. Most of what you know about history is wrong. Not because the history book doesn't touch on it, but it just omits. You've got 2 sentences about carpetbaggers, and then you have 5,000 pages about the Great Depression and about how socialism saved everyone. Well, that's not true. But that's how it's presented, by people who have an axe to grind, and they happen to benefit by that presentation of false reality. The U.S. doesn't have a free press. Arguably, the only free press that exists is this sort of thing, independent commentary, independent journalism. And we're being persecuted and harassed and abused on the same tech sites that enabled us to exist in the first place, necessitating an entirely new generation of tech that's geared towards free speech. New tech, or all tech as in the colloquial sense, that in itself is being persecuted. Forcing it, by the way, and this is the one silver lining, and then here's an optimistic end of the video, forcing it to evolve much, much quicker than old tech. Forcing it to evolve past censorship. Not all sites will make it. But some of them will. That's why I've cast the net so wide. I'll still be there in 10 years doing my commentary. Hell of a lot of other people haven't diversified enough, and they won't. That's about all. Peace out.